So, in the exploration of peace and its elusive nature within the realm of human society, we're often confronted with this paradoxical phenomenon. So this is the fervent advocacy of peaceful ideologies seem to yield little tangible resolution to the persistent issue of violence itself. So, hot take, right? So this observation prompts a critical inquiry into the efficacy of holding views of peace without a concurrent understanding of the underlying dynamics of violence. So to delve into this complex interplay between peace and violence, it becomes imperative to dissect the intricacies of both concepts, right? Examine their origins, manifestation, the interconnections with the broader socio-cultural structure and context. So at the outset, it's essential to define the terms peace and violence here, right? So we can provide a foundational understanding for exploration, and we can all agree upon specific terms. So peace in its simplest form can be conceptualized as a state of harmony, tranquility, non-violence, characterized by the absence of conflict or hostility, or the ability to deal with a conflict and hostility in such a way as to not create violence or violent tendencies. So it encompasses not only the absence of overt physical aggression, but also the presence of justice, equality, mutual respect among individuals and communities and other social constructs. So violence, on the other hand, is a multifaceted phenomenon encompassing a spectrum of behaviors and actions that cause physical, psychological, or emotional harm to oneself or to others. So it can manifest in a whole host of these various forms, including, but it's not really limited to, abuse, structural violence, systemic oppression, and environmental degradation. So the prevailing narrative surrounding peace often emphasizes the promotion of positive values like love, compassion, empathy, cooperation, and it's really as antidotes to the scourge of violence. So while these values undoubtedly play a crucial role in fostering harmonious relationships and social cohesion, they alone may not suffice to address the deep-rooted cause of violence entrenched within the fabric of society, right? So merely advocating for peace without a nuanced understanding of the underlying dynamics of violence, I think, risks oversimplifying a complex issue and may inadvertently perpetuate systemic injustices and inequalities. So to truly grapple with the phenomena of violence here and its impact on human societies, it's imperative to adopt an interdisciplinary approach that integrates insights from various fields, right? Like psychology, sociology, anthropology, political science, history, philosophy, spirituality. All of these things really have to go together here. And within this approach, it enables us to contextualize violence within its broader social, cultural, economic, political dimensions, and it helps shed light on its underlying causes, mechanisms, and consequences here. So it's quite a broad topic to really indulge in. So one of the central tenets of understanding violence is the recognition of its multifractional nature, right? Rooted in a complex interplay of individual, interpersonal, structural, and systemic factors. So at the individual level, violence may arise from a whole host of psychological, emotional, and behavioral factors, again, including but not limited to unresolved trauma, learned patterns of aggression, distorted perceptions of reality, and all of these maladaptive coping mechanisms, right? So psychological theories such as attachment theory or social learning theory and cognitive behavioral theory, they really offer valuable insights into the underlying mechanisms driving individual acts of violence and aggression here. So these interpersonal dynamics and social relationships play quite a pivotal role in shaping patterns of violence within communities and societies globally. So family dynamics, peer influences, social norms, cultural values, and institutional practices all contribute to the perpetuation or at least the mitigation of violence within social context. So sociological perspectives such as social disorganization theory, strain theory, or social control theory, they provide valuable frameworks for understanding the social detriments of violence and the mechanisms through which social structures influence individual and collective behaviors alike, right? So violence is often embedded within broader structural and systemic inequalities that disproportionately affect marginalized and vulnerable populations. So structural violence, it's this concept introduced by sociologist Johan Galtung. It refers to the systemic ways in which these social, economics, and political structures perpetuate harm and injustice, leading to disparities in access to resources, opportunities, and power. So these structural inequalities intersect with other forms of oppression, including like racism, sexism, classism, ableism, homophobia, right? And it creates intersecting axes of privilege and oppression that shape individuals' experiences and perpetuate cycles of violence and exploitation. So historical legacies of colonialism, imperialism, slavery, genocide, and other forms of state-sanctioned violence continue to reverberate through contemporary societies, right? And it leaves these lasting scars on individuals, communities, and nations. So the intergenerational transmission of trauma here, the cultural memory and a collective identity, it further complicates efforts to address the legacy of historical injustices and reconcile conflicting narratives of victimhood and perpetration. So in addition to its interpersonal and structural dimensions, violence is also perpetuated and reinforced by broader systems of power, domination, and control operating at the national, regional, and global levels. So political violence, including state oppression, military aggression, terrorism, armed conflict, they often, it stems from these geopolitical rivalries, right? Resource competition, ideological conflicts, and struggles for territorial control. So the militarization of societies, the arms trade, and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction exacerbate tensions and contribute to a culture of violence and insecurity on a global scale here. So economic violence is manifested in poverty, inequality, exploitation, and resource extraction. It further exacerbates the social disparities and perpetuates cycles of deprivation and marginalization. So neoliberal economic policies, austerity measures, corporate greed, right? Deregulation prioritized profit over people, and it exacerbating social inequalities and undermining the welfare of vulnerable populations. And then we look at environmental violence driven by unsustainable development, resource depletion, pollution, climate change. It possesses existential threats to human societies and ecosystems alike, right? So the exploitation and degradation of natural resource disproportionately impact indigenous communities, frontline populations, and future generations, and exacerbating social conflicts and ecological collapse, right? So to address the root cause of violence and pave the way for lasting peace, it's imperative to adopt a holistic approach that addresses the interconnectedness of individual, interpersonal, structural, and systemic factors contributing to violence here. So this necessitates a paradigm shift from reactive and punitive approaches focusing on symptom management to proactive, preventative strategies aimed at addressing underlying drivers of violence and promoting social justice, equity, and human rights. And at the individual level, interventions aimed at promoting mental health, emotional well-being, conflict resolution skills, and nonviolent communication, they can empower individuals to break free from cycles of violence and cultivate healthy, respectful relationships based on empathy, compassion, and this sense of mutual understanding. So restorative justice approaches, trauma-informed care, community-based initiatives can provide alternative pathways for healing, accountability, reconciliation, fosters a culture of peace and solidarity within communities. And at the interpersonal level, efforts to challenge oppressive social norms and promote gender equality, foster social cohesion, and build inclusive communities. It can create environments conducive to nonviolence and cooperation. So education awareness raising and dialogue initiatives, they can challenge stereotypes, prejudices, and discriminatory attitudes, and promotes empathy, tolerance, and respect for diversity. At the structural and systemic levels, policy reforms, legislative measures, and institutional changes are needed to address the root causes of violence and redress systemic injustices here. So this may include efforts to dismantle oppressive structures, right? And redistribute resources and empower marginalized communities to participate in decision-making, all these decision-making processes that affect their lives. So investment in social services, public health, education, housing, and employment can address underlying drivers of violence and promote social inclusion, economic opportunity, and human flourishing for all. So this is something we find in Ananda Marga. They talk about this with PROUT. It's progressive utilization theory, P-R-O-U-T, PROUT. Check it out on just a quick YouTube. Maybe I'll put a link here as well so we can discuss this a little bit further. Anyway, the international cooperation and diplomacy and conflict resolution mechanisms are essential for addressing the root causes of interstate conflicts and promoting peaceful resolution of disputes and fostering cooperation and mutual respect among nations. So multilateral institutions such as the United Nations, regional organizations, and civil society networks, they play kind of a crucial role in facilitating dialogue, mediation, and peace-building efforts on a global level. Although there are some things that need to be looked at with those organizations as well. We may need to have new organizations and structures set up in place in order to bring and fulfill these the lasting resolve. So the pursuit of peace here, it requires this comprehensive understanding of the underlying dynamics of violence and a commitment to addressing its root cause at the individual, interpersonal, structural, and systemic levels. So by adopting a holistic approach that integrates insight from various disciplines and engages diverse stakeholders here, we can pave the way for a more just, equitable, and peaceful world for present and for future. Namaskar, everybody.